Where do you go when you fear that seeking help for mental illness may be detrimental to your life, your professional life, or just exposure to the public may hurt you? I am Robert Asencio. This is my co-host, David Magnusson. We're here joined by forensic psychologist Dr. Shari Schwartz, who's also a professor at FSU. We just spoke with you on a different episode, examining the mindset of essentially active shooter, mass murderer. But doctor, we wanted to bring you back and discuss this issue of confidentiality, fear that a lot of people have, right? That, if I were still in law enforcement and I had struggle with mental illness, right? And I had these ideations that I maybe wanted to harm myself or somebody else. We're not talking about road rage. Where do I go? Because I fear that if I disclose carrying a firearm, I'll be exposed.
That is a major difficulty, particularly for certain careers like law enforcement, even mental health professionals who are licensed. If you disclose that you're not doing okay, this has the potential to impact your livelihood. And I think we have to start with having people understand that law enforcement officers, that's their job, right? They're working to earn a paycheck to do what the rest of us do with our work, which is to keep the lights on, to keep a roof over your head, to put food on the table, right? To take care of your family. And so disclosing has the potential to impact their ability to earn a living, right? So there's a lot of implications. And so it's not always a feasible option. And of course, we understand the other side. If you're carrying a gun and you're really feeling like you're going to harm yourself or harm somebody else, you have an ethical responsibility, right, to disclose. But at the same time, if you do that, you could suffer some significant losses. And so can you go to counseling? Of course. This is what a lot of people say. They say, oh, well, get yourself into counseling. Yes, well, counseling costs some. It's not free. And the mental health professional that you talk to may, depending on what you tell them, violate confidentiality and warn somebody, right? Or to potentially have the person Baker acted. That's what we call it in Florida, an involuntary civil commitment. So there's still those implications as well. So there's a number of issues that way. Now, there are some resources out there that are free, that if somebody's in a moment of crisis, it's not ongoing therapy, but if you're really having that moment and you just need to get some things off your chest, you can dial 988, which is the national crisis hotline number. Suicide prevention, yep. And there's also crisis text line. And so you can dial 741-741 and text the word home. But we know there was an article that came out in the news a few months ago here in Florida that approximately 1/4, 25% of the calls to 988 are going unanswered. So these resources are only as good as their availability, right? And so if you're really in this hot moment of crisis and you're calling and you're on hold, they're not just going to disconnect you and say, oh, there's nobody to talk to you right now. You're going to be on hold. Even with Crisis Text Line, I volunteer for them. And we can see in the queue how many people are waiting for help, and it is a lot. And so they're just waiting, sometimes for an hour or more. Most people give up in that time, right? So there are resources out there, but we have to do better as a community to make those resources more available to people who need them. And the way to do that is to volunteer.
Well, hold that thought right there. Before we go there to volunteering, let's go back to this mindset because, we know our brethren. We know how we think, how our community thinks. And of course, this issue extends way beyond law enforcement, as you just mentioned, Doctor. How do we change that mindset, brother?
There are no
to seek help.
There are no easy answers. I mean, you hit it right on the head. I mean, on our first episode, we had Chief Manny Morales talking about
Very courageous.
with great courage and leadership about he goes for a monthly checkup, and it does him well. Now, would that trickle down to lower ranks because he's at the top of the department? You would hope that people would be just as understanding if they caught wind or to remove the stigma. What do we say in every episode? It is a strength to take care of yourself, to seek the help as needed, just as it would be if you broke your arm. I mean, if you walk down and what happened to your arm? It's all right. I don't need to get it set. It'll heal on its own. People are gonna look at you oddly. Mine's no different. A broken mind. So the person would have to know at the point that he or she's going through something and immediately jump on that and seek that help. And help themselves. Now, the flip side is that, but what happens if somebody finds out? Now they're going to take away my gun. Now I can't work off-duty jobs. I got a lot of bills to pay. These are real concerns. So there are no easy answers. And to be fair, if certain words are used during during the course with the psychologist, they are bound to have to report that. If somebody's homicidal or suicidal, it's going to have to be brought up. And so, that weighs. In all our discussions, there are no easy answers.
I think it's understanding the greater good here is actually at stake, right? Your family, your community, your job. If you seek help, chances are you'll be allowed to go back on the road and be taken care of. But if you don't, and you spiral out of control, as we've seen others recently play out in the news, the consequences are real and deep and pretty significant, can be significant. So doctor, you mentioned about volunteering. So there's a void, right? We know
Yes.
that there's not, the resources are there, probably understaffed and sometimes underfunded, and that's probably a Florida thing. Because I know the mental health crisis is it's a national program, but it's funded statewide, is that right? Or by the state?
That's a really good question. I think the states have their own, each has their own centers
they're
that they
responsible
run
for their own.
throughout the
Okay.
state. But they do get federal money, I believe, to do that. But the thing is, now, post-pandemic, this is one of the positive things I think that has come out of the pandemic. You can get the training to be a volunteer fully online. So for example, for Crisis Text Line, I know this because I went through it, and even though I'm a psychologist, they were completely unimpressed by that and said, you still have to do our 40-hour training. And it's asynchronous, so I was able to do the training in the evenings when I had time. And once I passed the 40-hour training, they put you on the text line. I never had to leave my home. I could quite literally be in my pajamas, but helping people who are texting in and having a crisis. The nice thing about these resources is that you don't have to identify yourself as a caller or a texter. And 988 you can text as well. I should mention that. But you don't have to identify yourself. You don't have to give your name. You don't have to say where you live. You don't have to say what your job is.
That's the person texting you, calling in.
The person texting, yeah. So it is
Person in
completely
crisis.
confidential, almost anonymous, if you will, right? So you don't have to disclose those things, which is nice. But in terms of the calls going unanswered, we need the volunteers. We need people to step up. And this is a tall order because people are working, sometimes working 2 and 3 jobs, again, to earn a living, to keep the lights on and food on the table and a roof over your head.
Life is no joke now. It's hard for a lot of people.
It is hard. It is. This is a way, though, I will tell you, there are, when you get that training and you volunteer, there are avenues for paid jobs with these services. So I did a Google search last night, knowing that we were going to talk about this, and there are some paid jobs with 988. And a lot of them are remote, where you can work from anywhere. So if you're looking for something and you think you want to give back to the community, and I think we all have to pitch in if we want to start to address these issues of mental health and people really struggling. Like you said, life is no joke. A lot of people are struggling. So being there for others and knowing that the call will be answered if you need to reach out is huge in terms of giving back to the community and keeping your community healthy, so to speak.
Yeah, and again, to reiterate, You don't have to be a psychologist to participate, right?
No, you don't. College students, I always tell college students who need volunteer work, who need clinical hours, this is a great way to get it. Something like crisis text line, 988 volunteering, this all counts. It looks good on your graduate school applications if you want to go on that way. If you need to get clinical hours when you're in graduate school, which if you're in a mental health program, you do, again, this is a way to do it. And I would say to police officers I think would be fantastic volunteers for this, not that they have so much time, but I think this would translate into, and it does for most people, the skills that you learn, which aren't all that technical. It's just really about being empathetic, being a good listener, and helping people to validate their feelings is really what it boils down to say, I get it. This is all normal. It makes sense that you're feeling overwhelmed, given what you've described that you're going through, and giving someone that validation, it tends to help them decompress and get to a place where, okay, you know what, 20 minutes ago, I was circling the drain and now I can face another day.
Take them from a hot moment to a cool moment.
Correct, exactly.
Gotcha.
That's what crisis text line tells us.
So we've got 3 minutes left. In the last 3 minutes, how do they go? If somebody wants to volunteer, how do they find opportunities to do so?
So they can Google 988. So if you're in Florida, you can Google 988 Florida and mention that you want to, put in the Google search that you want to volunteer. And this will bring up the way that you can do that. Crisis text line is www.crisistextline.org. And again, you can Google that and put in the search that you want to volunteer. That's how I found out about it. And you sign up for a training program, and they don't just let anybody do it. You have to be able to pass a background check, right?
Okay.
They want to make sure that you don't have any significant history of whatever it is they're looking for, and this is the way to get that training. The training is completely free. And you learn a lot of skills, you learn a lot about what's going on in your community with regard to mental health crises and things like that. And one of the things I love about Crisis Text Line, I'm focused on that because I'm a volunteer for them, so it's very familiar to me. There are so many resources that they have access to that they share, we can share with people who text in. And so for me, I don't have a lot of time either, but I make 4 hours a week to log on to my computer. Not at once. You can do an hour, 4 days a week, and really spend time taking some texters and talking with them.
David, any last thoughts before we close out this episode?
You don't need specialized training. You just need to care, and how it all comes full circle. That's one of the answers we're looking for.
Yeah. I think that the one thing that I've walked away from these last 12 episodes is the fact that just like public safety, it's a responsibility of all of us, right? We all have a part to play, and helping others with mental health, certainly deal with the silent struggle so they don't suffer silently, so they seek help, is really, really important. The benefits, my God, outweigh not doing anything at all. So, any last words?
We got to remove the word silent.
Yes. Doctor, any last words?
Thank you for having me. I could talk about this for hours, as you know. I would just ask that people consider volunteering, at least look into it and see what it requires.
Yeah. If you need help, we have a mobile response unit in Miami-Dade County. That's MRT, Mobile Response Team. And you can find them at 1-800-HELP-YOU. On that note, again, to the Millers, Miami's Community News, Rochelle, our producer behind the scenes, thank you so much. To you, the audience, thank you. My co-host, Doctor.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time.